Good afternoon, Parsons. Thanks for taking the time to come out to be here together, and thanks to the communication design programs for organizing this event. My name is Brian Singh, and like Brendan said, I'm an associate's degree graphic design major. I'm very excited to quickly share two of the many dozen short-term projects I've completed over the last 8 months. My aim in this talk is to contextualize this work under the prompt of authenticity, and to do so, let me first give you some context about myself and the AAS program. My interests have always been in social structures and how its individuals can engage with their environments, and I've continually surrounded myself with good, like-minded folk as I've moved through spaces. Though none of my friends have ended up in design, we've taken this reasoning into pretty much every other profession you can think of. Before I finished undergrad, I took an offer with a lab called the Center for Emotional Intelligence. I was brought on to analyze the data they had collected from over 20,000 workers across several large companies. There were about 900 or so categorical variables and quantitative variables, so in my opinion, this was a pretty sizable data set. This work manifested itself in a myriad of ways, from violin plots, plotting populations using emotions as the axes, to heat map matrices displaying regression values, and all the sentiment analysis in between. Some of this was useful for my boss and her bosses, and some of this was simply useful for myself in navigating such large data sets. Before my time at Parsons, I had never really taken a formal class, design or otherwise. I could never consider form making as a career path. Coming from an academic liberal arts background in education, landing about any job was a relief. Therefore, the AAS program, being a focused 2-year postgraduate program, preparing students to enter the design industry, seemed perfect to me. The 3 literacies I sought at Parsons were Illustrator, typography, and embeddedness. My goal was to consolidate these systems in tandem with my existing skill set towards a working methodology that I could hopefully bring towards the marketplace. I quickly learned, however, that there had to be more of a reason for all of this. As much as craft could be mapped onto content, the incredible density of numbers of assignments characteristic of the AAS program forced me to take a step back and question the core of the work. I came to the conclusion that, to the extent that these student works essentially functioned as self-initiated, removed from the designer-client relationship, it would therefore need to be enacted on my own accord with whatever facilities Parsons would allow to be at my disposal. The work would therefore exist as a site for my own research into the field and the context in which it exists, as much a point of critical engagement as it was the site of my own becoming. As I'll attempt to convey, I found that these processes could then in turn reveal themselves in the language of the outputs through their formal gestures. With this in mind, the first project I've brought to you today is an Imagine newsletter crafted in my second semester course studio with Professor Hank Van Assen. Tasked with constructing a printed object based around the theme of shifting borders, the project was imagined as a printed newsletter based on humans as ecological disaster, organized by Financial Quarter. The irony of this is certainly not lost on me. These forms were imagined by the density it sought to represent. I first began with the body copy, time set in the Times New Roman that we live in, that I was so used to seeing in the only style that I truly knew, the MLA. From there, an identity was fleshed out using Canada Type's Orpheus Pro, a revival of Walter Tieman's pre-World War I typeface Orpheus, and contextualized using Colophon Foundry's Space Mono Italics, an italicized monospace typeface indicative of our modernity. The articles were all published from the third quarter of 2018, sourced from the web, fleshing out the printed object as a mark of the times. The baseline grid was set to half the leading, and pull quotes were sequenced in order of their position within the articles. Both would allow the reader multiple entry points in the tension between seeing the typography's textual density and the reading about ecological disaster. Given my goals at Parsons, I had intended for this project to be solely typographic, to demonstrate the literacy I had built up. However, Hank encouraged me to think more graphically about the relationship between text and image. And in turn, I came with a center spread matrix of images, of equal density to the copy, reflective of our time and grounded by the reality of our environmental condition, more so than any single image could represent. Additionally, the challenge to think outside of typography pushed me to further consider both sides of the Anthropocene, particularly in the context of the surface. I moved to the French fold, printing a poster on the back of each signature. This reasoning, in turn, led to an unbound object. If its signatures were to be cast in the wind, it would hopefully land across the gaze of another, providing another touch point of engagement. This reasoning has served as a foundation for much of my other work, including printed matter for a speculative exhibition on image production in the context of machine learning. Contextualized through research and constructed through various methods characteristic of graphic design, like typographic hierarchy and simple gestures, applied across a system, the designed object should consider the range of engagements across a set. The goal is that the constructed object can facilitate a common language. And with that, my name is Brian Singh. If your studio is looking for a summer intern, let's chat. Thanks so much for coming out.